Hello again, friends from around the globe and among the stars. Welcome to another episode of The Adventures of Abernathy Franklin. We last left Frankie and Franny Lynn as butterflies hanging with Bigfoot. This week, we'll hear from Natty, who, if you recall, had herself a lovely time at the Orion Spa, not once, but twice. Let's see what Natty's getting up to now. Well, maybe instead of being so negative and angry all the time, you should try giving her a chance. How about you try getting off my dick and back into your own goddamn lane? I'm glad you find talk therapy helpful, but I swear it makes you fucking insufferable. Did I ask for tea time with fucking Freud? No, I had a bad morning and all I wanted was some sympathy. What, like you have so much sympathy for anyone else? What about when I was... Hello again, friends. Natty here. Yes, I know. Eavesdropping isn't the most polite pastime to engage in. But in my defense, this was a public setting, and my entertainers were rather raucous for a noontime lunch table. Truthfully, I can't pretend that I would normally make a concerted effort to ignore drama external to my own life out of consideration for the unknown parties. Judge me if you want to, but I find people listening to be far more amusing than people watching, particularly when the gossip gets juicy. I don't personally shove my all in at any time to any of the conversations. No, I'm only an observer. As one who does not partake of voyeuristic joy when it comes to athletics, politics, or religion, you could say that my less than accidental overhearing of a heated argument is my version of sports spectatorship. When I can collect enough data from one of these shouting matches, and though it may not be entirely magnanimous of me, I do often like to choose sides. Picking my team colors, I suppose you might say. From what I could gather of the current conversation at the table just behind me, I presumed that the two verbal boxers were close family members. However, before I could continue listening long enough for confirmation of this educated guess, a highly tattooed, fit alternate version of me plopped down in the chair across from me, and immediately started snacking on my french fries. Natty Jean, look who's back in Fabian's neck of the woods. How goes the battle, friend? You done with that sandwich? Frankie pointed at my half-eaten turkey on marble rye with another french fry that she had snatched without permission, but I didn't harbor any hard feelings about it. She just had such a charming air about her. Help yourself, I replied, pushing the plate of lunch leftovers in her direction. As I did so, another unfamiliar Abernathy with a canvas messenger bag covered in novelty buttons took the seat next to Frankie. With a mouthful of sandwich and the skill of a veteran ventriloquist, Frankie introduced this additional us. Natty Jean, meet Franny Lynn. Franny Lynn, this here is Natty Jean, Frankie said, again using the food items in her hand like a conductor's wand and pointing in each of our directions as she introduced us. Pleasure of making your acquaintance, Natty Jean. Franny Lynn stumbled a bit over her words as if she were mildly inebriated. Not that I judged her for that. As I may have mentioned before, I myself find sobriety can be offensively dull. Very nice to meet you, Franny Lynn. Sorry, where are you getting the Jean from? I asked Frankie, who was already on her last bite of sandwich and reaching for what was left of my iced tea. You don't like it? Natty Jean just seems to roll off the tongue so easily. Makes you sound like a rock star musician, don't you think? Do you play an instrument? You certainly are a rock star. Ha ha. Frankie winked and pointed at me in a jovial sort of way, and I couldn't help feeling like I had just got an approval nod from the cool kid. It was odd to have the sensation of looking up to a person who was really just me from another reality, but I didn't dwell on it. So is this time-space location a favorite haunt of yours then, Natty Jean? Frankie asked. I do like it, but mostly I thought I should pop back and check in with Fabian and Brody. I didn't like to think we caused too much trouble with the burglar we left hogtied at their place before we hit the Orion portal, I replied. Oh, yeah, forgot about him, Frankie laughed. Was he still there when you got back? No, Fabian and Brody got home from investigating a supposed witch's cottage somewhere in southern Germany, and they found the burglar and my note. I started to explain. Had to call some boys in blue to cuff him proper then, I suppose. Or whatever color they don around these parts. Frankie nodded to a nearby waitress and shook the empty glass of tea by way of requesting another. Actually, Fabian got into the burglar's pockets, found his cell phone, and called his mother, I said. Ha! Score one for Fabian, that's some good thinking, Frankie said as the waitress dropped off another tea and went about her other tables. Turns out, dear old Mum was a high-class diplomat of some variety, I continued. She showed up with a handful of private security guys who promptly hauled our intruder off the premises, and Mum Diplomat handed Fabian and Brody a substantial wad of cash in exchange for their discretion. By the time I showed up to get the scoop, they were on their way out to spend the windfall on some new ghost hunting gear. Don't you just love when the universe throws some unexpected good fortune your way? Good for them. You know, we really ought to join them for a ghost hunt one of these days. Franny here loves a good spook fest. Hey, Franny Lynn? Frankie said, elbowing Franny to get her attention. Up to this point, Franny Lynn had been quietly and dazedly looking about our surroundings with a vapid sort of smile on her face. At this nudge from Frankie, she seemed to snap back from her reverie and into the conversation. Me? Oh yes. Spooks, specters, ghosties, ghoulies, even demons. You know, if you give them a chance, most of them are really quite friendly. I was starting to suspect Franny Lynn's state to be more on the side of lofty, shall we say, rather than affected by drink. But again, I harbored no judgment of her for that. So to what do I owe the pleasure of Frankie and Miss Franny Lynn gracing this dimension with their presence? I asked of the pair of me's that had joined my table. I suppose you could say it's a work trip, eh, Franny? Frankie said as she slurped the last of the iced tea refill through a straw and proceeded to tip the glass upwards to catch and crunch down on the ice that was left. If you love what you do, you can't call it work, Franny Lynn said, slapping the table 3 times on the last bit for emphasis. There's a sort of, fourth dimensional speakeasy, maybe you could say. Secret entrance in the basement of the bar next door. We're waiting for her to open up for business this evening, so I can pop on in and see some clients. Famous clients, no less, Frankie added, her left cheek bulging with ice cubes. You cater to celebrities. That's interesting. What line of work are you in? I asked in Franny Lynn's direction, though by now I thought I could make a fair guess of what that messenger bag may well be full of. We're all celebrities in the eyes of the universe, you know? Every one of us. But yes, I do cater to celebrities on occasion. You see, I offer consciousness-enhancing substances of all cosmic varieties to famous, infamous, and common folks alike. Would you like to join us? There's gonna be a show first. Franny Lynn continued to speak in a slightly broken stupor sort of way. But all the same, I would say her personality seemed decidedly effervescent. I concluded that I liked this Franny Lynn Abernathy iteration. I'm always in the mood for some entertainment, I said, noticing that the argumentative pair from the table behind me had ceased their bickering in favor of taking the check, and were now making their gloomy way out of the restaurant. What sort of show? You said it was in the 4th dimension? How does that work? I asked. Slicker than a Swiss timepiece. Frankie stepped in on the evasive explanation front. And it's not really a show so much as an improv troupe. Happens to include a few alternately incarnated versions of some personal favorites of mine. John Belushi and Gilda Radner. Not ready for primetime players, now in the form of some fourth density elemental actors. John's a sylph, air elemental, and Gilda's an undine, fae folk of the watery persuasion. Frankie swirled her glass and indicated towards the ice left in it, as if making note of the nearest water could possibly add more novelty to this information. You mean to tell me John Belushi and Gilda Radner have reincarnated as a fairy and a mermaid, and they do improv at a speakeasy in France? I couldn't help some of my surprise. As you may recall, friends, outside of my visit to the Orion portal with Frankie and one of the newest Abernathy Franklin travelers, Nikki, I really haven't explored much of the cosmos outside of our home planet. It's not really France, actually. They're in a fourth-dimensional overlay of Earth, in the same time-space region as France. You know, I have some DMT if you really want to get a good look at the layout. Franny Lynn reached for her messenger bag and began rummaging through it as if looking for said DMT. Frankie, who seemed amused but aware of our public surroundings, reached across Franny Lynn to stop her from bringing illicit substances out into the open. Maybe once we've gotten some good seats at the show, eh, Franny babe? Franny gave Frankie an oversized nod. Oh, right, she said, tapping the side of her nose as if she were being sly. Discretion. For the hours remaining before the bar would open and we could make our way into the fourth dimension, I took Frankie and Franny to some of my favorite shops in the area. Franny Lynn frequently tried to offer passers-by consciousness enhancement, as she liked to term it, and Frankie would avert the potentially problematic conversation to the subject of available snacks, by way of keeping disinterested parties from sending the authorities our way. So, have you seen these fairy versions of John and Gilda perform before? I asked Frankie while we sat on a bench waiting for the bar to open. Not yet, but I hear from Death they're just as good in this incarnation as they were on Saturday Night Live, Frankie responded, sipping on a smoothie. I'm sorry, did you say Death? In the short time I had known Frankie, she had demonstrated a knowledge of the cosmos far greater than my own. But the oddity factor in some of the things she said had yet to wear off. The Grim Reaper herself, Frankie confirmed. She said she was sorry to have to take John from this human incarnation so early. But seeing his fourth-dimensional performances, she was glad he was keeping on with entertaining the masses. Death does love to see folks making use of their talents. That there be our cue, ladies, Franny Lynn interjected, pointing to the bar where the open sign had suddenly come alight. Lead the way, Miss Franny, Frankie said, getting up and depositing her empty smoothie cup in a nearby trash can. Franny Lynn led us through the bar and into a back storage room. Of course, not before she handed off a small glowing vial of consciousness enhancement to the bartender, evidently the price for our entry. Franny lifted the corner of a heavy rug to reveal a trap door in the floor of the establishment, and when said door was opened, it revealed a bluish-white portal. Allons-y, Franny Lynn said, and motioned for Frankie and my good self to enter first. Frankie did a feet-first jump into the portal, and I followed suit. We landed in a cozy theater, full of big squishy beanbag-like puffs, upon which were already seated some curious-looking beings. After the Orion portal trip, I was hardly fazed by seeing some reptilians, classic greys, gnomes and goblins, even here and there a winged sprite. Those last, by the way, are not the tiny Tinkerbells most humans imagine. I've since learned from Frankie that most fourth-dimensional fairies are in fact between 10 and 14 feet tall. Hell of a wingspan, too. We found some empty poofs in the southeasterly direction of the space, near the front row to the as-yet unoccupied stage. Frankie told us to save her a seat while she went to scrounge up some snacks for the event. "So, Franny," I said as we sat down, "you go galaxy hopping with Frankie often?" "Oh no, I don't do extreme sports. Never been much of an athlete, personally," Franny replied. "Frankie and I are old pals, though. We go way back to Budapest." "Are you both from Hungary originally?" I asked, curious about the origins of these other versions of Abernathy Franklin. "No, I'm from Ohio, on my version of Earth," Franny began. "Frankie? Huh. You know, I don't know where Frankie grew up. But we met in Budapest. 1600s or thereabouts. See, I wanted to offer my merchandise to a vampire there. I had never met a vampire. I thought it would be fun. Zilfer Drakey was his name." "Was? Aren't vampires immortal?" I chuckled. My presumption was based on literature, as I have never myself met an actual vampire. At least, not to my knowledge. Oh yeah, he's still knocking around. Just doesn't go by Zilfer anymore. Changes up the name every 20 to 50 years or so. Or whenever neighbors get suspicious. You know how it is." Franny waved a careless hand in my direction, as if the comings and goings of vampires should be commonly understood by all Abernathys. "Anyway, Frankie was already there. She does like the weird ones when she's in a frisky mood. And yeah, we got to Zilfer, good and mindfully expansive. He decided he wanted to see a more modern era. So we dropped him off in the 1980s. Good fun." Franny clapped her hands in happy summation. "Dare I ask what sort of hijinks you two came from before finding my lunch table?" I was starting to think I ought to spend more time with Franny Lynn and Frankie. Their adventure sounded like the kind of party I'd like to join. "We were hanging out with Bigfoot, who goes by Andrew, incidentally," Franny said. "I shared some sweet nectar that turned us into butterflies for a few hours." "Oh yeah, Nikki mentioned Frankie telling her she had spent a few hours as a butterfly. You guys do that often?" I asked, wondering what sort of butterfly I'd like to be. "Oh no, just the one time so far," Franny responded. My brain did some confused turning for a moment. Hang on. Frankie told Nikki she had already spent time as a butterfly, but you said you both just came here from hanging with Bigfoot. Wouldn't Frankie have been with you after she had been at the Orion portal with us? Franny giggled happily. "Well, linear time doesn't exactly apply to Frankie now, does it?" she answered. Before I could ask further questions, Frankie's voice sounded to my right. "Budge up, ladies! Snack cart coming through!" Frankie was carrying 3 trays full of drinks, something resembling popcorn, and an array of candy boxes and bags. One of the boxes on the tray she handed to me was twitching and making rattling sounds, as if its contents were fighting to escape. "Make sure you just open the corner of that one," Frankie said, pointing to the box of treats in question. "You tear off the top of that box and those tricky buggers will jump out everywhere. Good sour candies, though. Oh, looks like the show is starting. In what seemed like the very same moment Frankie had announced it, the lights dimmed in the theater and a spotlight illuminated the stage. Well, friends, the show itself was near 2 whole hours long, so I won't describe it in full here, but certifiably enjoyable, every bit of it. I took particular liking to a skit titled The Case of the Missing Peanut that featured a monologue rant from the fairy version of John Belushi. Not unlike his human self from SNL skits in my dimension, Fairy Belushi took to a gradual increase of fervor in his detective character's determination to seek out justice for this missing peanut. A scaly-skinned, but long-legged and not mermaid-finned, version of Gilda Radner played his wife, who would try to calm him, to no avail. The entire scene ended in Belushi ramping himself into a choking fit and collapsing to the floor. The curtain closed after Gilda's punchline, "I wish he would get this excited over my peanut. She's been missing action longer than humans have been burning fossil fuels." I can't say that I have a clear recollection of the night's events after the show. We did follow Franny Lynn backstage to meet the cast, but she offered her enhancements to everyone present, and naturally, I took part of the festivities. Safe to say that John, Gilda, and all beings in the troupe of entertainers were fantastically pleasant to be around. If you can make your way to the 4th dimension for a spot of improv, I can say with confidence, you won't be disappointed. Live from South Dakota! Just playing. Though I have to say, I am jealous of our trio of Abernathy Franklins this week. I would love to see John Belushi and Gilda Radner perform live in any time-space dimension. Thank you all for tuning in this week. Don't forget to subscribe, share, give me a 5-star review, do all the things lovely listeners can do. And if you want to support more adventures with Abernathy, join my Patreon. That's patreon.com/AbernathyFranklin. And go get yourself a coffee mug or a t-shirt at my WaresbyFranki.com shop. You'll receive my eternal gratitude free of charge. I've finally got Twitter worked out, at Overseth Haleigh. Follow me for more fun. And as always, much love to you, my earthbound and cosmic friends. Wherever you are out there, I hope you're doing well.